Jumping right back in, right into the next segment, potential landing spots for T. Higgins. Higgins was signed to the franchise tag this past weekend, so he is going to be at training camp. Probably 90% is the likelihood that he's going to be at training camp, because why else would he sign it and still not show up and just lose money on purpose? So T. Higgins is finally going to make an appearance with the Cincinnati Bengals this year, but I still don't really feel like anything's going to get done. It's been too long. I think everybody in the NFL really knows it too. If anything, no one's really putting in a bid, at least from my knowledge on reading a bunch of stuff about T. Higgins. No one's really putting in a bid right now because they feel like they're just going to have to wait this whole situation out until T. Higgins is a free agent, and then they could just get him for free and not essentially give up anything. So we're going to take and explore a little bit more on what teams really could benefit from T. Higgins joining their team. And also the last note on that franchise tag, teams, along with the players, have until mid-July to work out an extension, but it doesn't seem likely, obviously, at this point with T. Higgins and the Bengals having to work out a new extension for Jamar Chase in the near future, already making Joe Burrow the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. T. Higgins can't really fit in there. It hasn't been revealed how much he would be asking for, but I would think probably north of 27 million maybe, for what he feels he's valued at. So that probably won't fit into any salary plans for the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's just a matter of time before he moves on. So let's look at some teams I think would really benefit from adding T. Higgins, starting off with the Jacksonville Jaguars. As you see, really a need for a number one wide receiver after Calvin Ridley departed. And not only did he leave, but he went within the division to the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, they gave him a lot of money, but very much a power move there by the Titans. I love it, but it really stinks for the Jacksonville Jaguars to lose your number one within the division. There's also the Clemson connection there with his former quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. That would be already a huge step ahead of really learning how to catch passes from a whole new quarterback. If you already have some experience with a really good quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, I'm not changing my position on how much he's worth. He is pretty good. He's not worth $55 million, but regardless of that, still a good connection there from the past in college. And also, there is a really good opportunity that I was thinking about here with the AFC South. There's the Houston Texans right up here, and then it seems like all the other teams are a little bit down below, trying to figure out everything. There's a lot of newness going around. No real indication on who really is that solidified number two team, or that team that could really compete with the Texans talent-wise, personnel-wise. So if you add T. Higgins to this team, I think it really propels them to at least that number two spot solidified, and keeping them there to at least put up a better fight against the Houston Texans, because I think the Texans right now are the clear-cut number one in that division, and not only that, solidified themselves as AFC contenders overall. So they have a good opportunity here if they add T. Higgins along with Gabe Davis and that offense that they're trying to figure out how to put together with Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram. It would look a lot better with T. Higgins. You have a nice young core there for the foreseeable future, next 4 years, for however long T. Higgins is there. You already have Trevor Lawrence for the next 4. I think that would be a great fit in Jacksonville. Then you move on a little bit more, still within the AFC in general, and you look at the Buffalo Bills, a very similar situation with the Jaguars. Their number one receiver moved on, but their identity has sort of shifted a little bit, trying to run the ball a little bit more, in my opinion, with James Conner using Josh Allen's build and just his ability to also run a lot more. A lot of play action, incorporating Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox some more, so they're changing their identity a bit more, but I think adding T. Higgins, if you pair him up with Keon Coleman, then also Dalton Kincaid, I was a really big fan of what I saw from him last year. I'm forgetting the name of their other receiver, the only receiver that stayed, but regardless of that, Higgins, Keon Coleman, and Kincaid already is a massive big three and an elite big three for the Buffalo Bills. And I got a comment here from my guy Eric. What do you think about Indianapolis? He'd be a number one for Anthony Richardson. I was close to putting the Indianapolis Colts on here, but I really like what they did honestly, in free agency and in the draft. I love the addition of A.D. Mitchell, bringing back Michael Pittman. Josh Downs is very good. Not a lot of people know about him, but he's a very solid rookie they had from last year. You mean it wouldn't hurt certainly to add T. Higgins. If they could add T. Higgins, that would be certainly another one. But just with the Bills, the Jaguars, and even the Commanders that I'm going to get to, I felt that the Colts almost already had a number one in Michael Pittman and A.D. Mitchell. I'm very high on A.D. Mitchell too. Whereas the Bills, the Jaguars are trying to figure out their situation right now. And now moving on to the Commanders, they also have a number one, but other than that, it drops off more than it does with these other situations. If you look at Terry McLaurin, I think it's been long overdue for him to finally have someone to take a little bit of the pressure off of him. And if you bring in T. Higgins to pair him up with Terry, not only does it help the team and Terry specifically, but also you have a rookie quarterback coming in there. How much that helps him out will be tremendously. You already brought in Austin Eckler. Brian Robinson is solid. Terry's obviously there still, like I mentioned before. You add another weapon to that team, and then they're also, similarly to the Jaguars, solidifying themselves, in my opinion, as competing for that number 2 spot with the Dallas Cowboys. And I might be jumping ahead of myself here, but I would probably even put them ahead of the Cowboys if they don't re-sign Dak or if they don't re-sign CeeDee. I think the Commanders in the next year or two could definitely be solidified as that number 2 team in the NFC East if they get a wide receiver like T. Higgins, maybe Brandon Ayuk like I talked about earlier this week. But those are those 3 teams. I have 3 more that I wanted to mention on here as well. The New England Patriots, the Los Angeles Chargers, and maybe to some people's surprise, the Chicago Bears. I'll start with the Bears because that one I think will catch more people by surprise. The Keenan Allen situation, as you see there on the screen. Keenan is on the last year of his deal. It is a big move because they traded for him, so they have to bring in that contract as well. So most likely they're going to wait to see how this year plays out. If he performs exceptionally well, they're most likely going to re-sign him, but there is that chance that, Keenan might want to move on himself, or the Bears feel like it might not be worth it in the long run, depending on how much he's asking for to extend him. So at the end of the day, if Keenan moves on, you still want to have a high-powered offense. Why not look at T. Higgins and bring him in maybe next offseason if you could get him as a free agent? Maybe trade for him this year, but I think they're pretty much set on their offense this year. So this is more of a long-term plan if T. Higgins makes it a free agency next season. And if they move on from Keenan Allen, similar build in T. Higgins, almost similar skill set that of Keenan Allen to T. Higgins. So I think would be a great fit to lose Keenan Allen, but to replace him right away with T. Higgins, I think would be certainly a great move for the Chicago Bears. Then, talking about the New England Patriots, they're very new. They're very young. It's all very uncertain what this offense is gonna look like. When is Drake May gonna start? How long will Jacoby Brissett play? How good is Jacoby Brissett going to look in this offense? So all those questions, and the receivers aren't the most eye-catching names either. So if you bring in a guy like T. Higgins, undeniably he would be that number 1 for whoever the quarterback is in whenever he does go there. And I think ushering in that new era, it'll make it a lot easier for Drake May to have a very proven number 1 receiver who is still 25, 26 years old from the top of my head in T. Higgins. I think that would be a massive help for New England, and they also have the most salary cap room in the entire NFL. So if T. Higgins wants a lot of money, maybe looking out for himself a little bit more, he could ask for a lot more if he really wants to go to the New England Patriots, asking for maybe close to 30, 29, 28 million dollars, and the Patriots could afford it. And if they decide that's all they need, they could sign him, and that could be even better for T. Higgins as another incentive to sign for the Patriots. So the last team I have on there, I think, is almost an obvious one with the Chargers. They lost Keenan Allen. They lost Gerald Everett. They moved on from Austin Eckler, bringing in a new identity with Jim Harbaugh, some new pieces in Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnson looking all right from his rookie season, still more there to prove from him. So bringing in someone that doesn't give you uncertainty and doesn't give you nerves about whether or not are they going to perform in T. Higgins would be certainly something awesome for Justin Herbert to have a great weapon, almost similar like Keenan Allen, like I mentioned before with the Bears. To have someone of a familiar size, familiar skill set with Justin Herbert, I think will be huge. Ladd McConkey's getting a lot of positive reviews in OTAs and minicamps, so adding him to that, a young, exciting offense with some good running backs and an improving offensive line, it would really just propel them a lot quicker to where they want to be rather than making it a little bit slower, because they could say that they want to run the ball all they wanted. They might not need these high-profile names, but at the end of the day, when your defense, like the Chargers have, isn't really one of the top defenses and you do have to put up points, you're going to need a bona fide playmaker on your team, and I don't think they really have that yet. Maybe Ladd McConkey can become that. I don't know, but you know that you can get that in T. Higgins, and if they add that to this Chargers offense who wants to run the ball anyway, then opening it up a lot more for T. Higgins, I think it's a great match for both parties, and those are the main 6 teams. There's a lot of other teams that I could have mentioned as honorable mentions. I'll just say them, like the Arizona Cardinals, pairing T. Higgins up with Marvin Harrison. The New York Giants also pairing Malik Neighbors with T. Higgins, I don't think would be too crazy. Like you mentioned, Eric, the Indianapolis Colts are another option. A lot of teams, oddly enough, need a receiver or two. I could throw the Steelers in there, but I don't think T. Higgins, the Bengals would trade with the Steelers. Maybe in free agency next year, but I find that highly unlikely. So there's a lot of teams that quite frankly need someone like T. Higgins, but only one of these teams is going to get him. I think these are the main 6 that are in contention for acquiring T. Higgins at some point, because I will stress again, I don't think he's going to stay with the Bengals. I think he's going to move on. So where he lands is going to be very exciting to keep predicting where he will, but I expect it to be one of these teams. Let me know who you guys think is the best fit for T. Higgins in 2024 or potentially waiting a year in 2025. But that is all for that segment. We're going to continue on with the show and move on to our next break. And when we return, we're going to talk some more about the Philadelphia Eagles and how they're changing their offensive scheme a little bit more with Kellen Moore coming in there as the offensive coordinator, and how it'll open up this offense even more than it did in 2023. Stick around to find out how Kellen Moore will do that. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for